Everyone wants to be happy, especially in loving relationships. Material society was supposed to help us to become happy, but the program's gone wrong. People are relating with each other less instead of more, and they're not happy. Western people buy more antidepressants than almost any other kind of medicine, and happy people don't need antidepressants. There's certainly plenty to be depressed about. Material society looks good from the outside, with its elaborate buildings, transport systems, information technology, scientific and medical advancements, and so on. But there's another side to it. The world in which we live is in crisis on every level. Material society has polluted the water, the land, and the air, and it's destroyed the natural ecological balance. Global warming is a reality. The polar ice caps are melting. The economy exists in the minds of speculators and investors, and it can collapse at any time. The rich and overprivileged enjoy at the expense of the poor and the underprivileged. Crime and violence are on the increase, and the structure of the family and society is dissolving. Internationally, there's always conflict between national, political, and religious groups. Terrorists can strike at any moment. And there's a real danger of total nuclear annihilation. These problems are so numerous, varied, and extensive, they're simply overwhelming. How to deal with them? Albert Einstein said, if you want to solve a problem, you have to be more intelligent than you were when you created it. But where's that superior intelligence going to come from? Not from material science, it seems. Material scientists can't tell us how to solve the problems that they themselves have caused. They know how to destroy the world, but they don't know how not to destroy it. The solution to the problems of the modern age is provided by the Vedic wisdom tradition, which appeared in ancient India and which is the oldest and most extensive wisdom tradition in the world. The language of the Vedic wisdom tradition is Sanskrit, which is the root of all the Indo-European languages. The Vedic wisdom tradition covers every aspect of life, including medicine, science, mathematics, economics, psychology, warfare, and sociology. And it also supports a breathtaking variety of spiritual practice and experience. The tradition's unique because it not only gives a consistent way of living, but it also explains the logical structure of reality. So as well as being systematic and scientific, it's also non-sectarian because it doesn't depend on blind faith. The Vedic wisdom tradition shows us what the main issue in modern society is. The problems and disturbances in modern society are simply symptoms, and the real problem with material society is materialism itself. Materialism is based on the philosophy that only matter exists and only the physical laws are acting. Everything that happens is simply physical actions and interactions. In principle, material science can explain everything in terms of what we can perceive with our senses and what we can understand with our mind. It can explain how everything is caused automatically and mechanically by the physical laws of nature. There's no need to believe in any supernatural causes. There's no need to believe that life is caused by a non-physical spirit. There's no need to believe that the cause and basis of the universe is non-physical or spiritual. This is old-fashioned sentiment. This is their philosophy. But actually, it's very simple for any observant and thoughtful person to see that this idea is completely false. It's not true that everything in the world happens mechanically by the action of the physical laws of nature. The world's full of artificial objects, such as computers, space telescopes, that can't be produced spontaneously by physical interactions. These artificial objects have to be created specially. Why is this? First of all, they're made of artificial substances, such as steel and plastic, and highly purified aluminium, copper, and silicon, which don't occur naturally. They not only don't occur naturally, they can't occur naturally. Mathematically, there's no possibility that chance and physical interactions can produce these artificial substances unaided. That's why they have to be created artificially. The forms of man-made objects are also artificial. Matter can't produce the forms of man-made devices such as watches, electronic devices, and engines by itself. Physical interactions by themselves produce irregular forms such as waves and cliffs, or very simple regular forms such as crystals. They don't produce complex functional forms. Now, there's another proof that not everything is simply physical actions and interactions. Human society is full of information. But physical interactions don't create information. They destroy it. Information theory proves mathematically that physical interactions can't create new information by themselves. And this is simply common sense, because scientists, since the time of Einstein, have agreed that information is not actually physical. The medium that holds the information is physical, but the information itself is not physical because it doesn't have mass or length or temperature or any other physical property. Information is measured in bits and bytes, which is a measure of the amount of knowledge that the information gives us. So since one can't describe information in purely physical terms, it's not possible to explain how information appears by any physical process. That means there must be another cause for the information in human society. So, living creatures, and especially human beings, constantly create artificial objects and information, whereas matter by itself can't do this. This means that living creatures are not just physical systems. They must exert some non-physical influence. that makes sense, because it's in the nature of living creatures always to strive to go beyond the limits and boundaries set by the natural laws. Plants grow upwards against the force of gravity. Frogs, fishes, and animals jump. Insects and birds fly. And human beings try to defeat the physical laws in every way they can. Actually, all living beings are outlaws, because we always try to escape the natural laws and live beyond them. And ironically, the greatest outlaws of all are the material scientists. For one thing, they help the rest of society to escape from the limitations of the natural physical laws. Besides that, when scientists investigate natural physical laws, they have to stand outside the laws and oppose them. The philosopher and scientist Michael Polanyi pointed out that in order to investigate gravity with a pendulum, Galileo had to oppose gravity to lift the pendulum bob. And in order to drop weights from the Leaning Tower of Pisa, he first had to climb up the tower. Similarly, to investigate electromagnetism, scientists have to separate electrical charges or magnetic poles. And to investigate the forces in the atom, they have to oppose the forces to break the atoms apart. Purposeful activity is specifically designed to oppose physical interactions. Now the question arises, who is the actual agent who performs purposeful activity? We say, I did that. But who's the I? It's not just the physical body, because physical bodies don't perform activities when they're asleep or dead. We don't do anything when we're unconscious. We only act when we're conscious. It's self-evident that the body doesn't act by itself. It is I, the conscious self, who performs activities through the body. But what is consciousness? The Vedic wisdom tradition points out that the conscious I is distinct from the inert material body. It has a completely different nature. We remember, I was 5 years old, I was 10 years old, and so on. The world around us changes. Our body changes. Our mind changes. Even our personality changes. But our I-ness, the fact that we exist as conscious individuals, remains the same. We keep the same name, the same passport, and the same identity number throughout our lives. The fundamental nature of matter is to change, whereas the I-ness of the conscious self doesn't change. That means that the conscious self is not matter. In Bhagavad Gita, which is a brief summary of the whole of the Vedic wisdom tradition, Krishna explains to Arjuna, the body changes from childhood to youth to old age, but the conscious being within the body doesn't change. Nobel laureate Sir John Eccles is a brain surgeon who's given experimental evidence that the conscious self is a non-physical entity that interacts with the body through the brain. The medical journal Lancet reported that 12% of patients who were revived after they had apparently died from a heart attack had seen what was happening in the operating theatre, even though they were clinically dead at the time, and some of them were even physically blind. This shows that consciousness is distinct from the body, although it has a close relationship with the body and it acts through the body. The body is like a machine, and the brain is like a computer. So who operates them? That's the conscious self. Now, machines and computers not only have an operator, they must have a manufacturer as well. Why is that? Because physical interactions can't create vehicles and computers by themselves. It's the same with the body. Physical interactions don't create bodies, they break them down. What happens when a living creature dies? The body immediately begins to decay. That's the physical laws acting. Nobel laureate Albert Szent-Györgyi said, "Life is a revolt against the statistical rules of physics, and death means that the revolt subsided and the statistical laws resumed their sway." So it seems that our physical body machine must be created by something other than physical laws. Of course, materialists don't like this idea. They say that physical interactions alone have created the bodies of living beings. But can materialists actually explain how physical interactions can produce living matter? No. The structure and composition of biological molecules, such as proteins and DNA, are so complex and so precise and specific that it's mathematically impossible to explain how such molecules could appear by chance and physical interactions. Human DNA contains enough information to fill an encyclopedia of 900 volumes. That's 40 times as big as the Encyclopedia Britannica. But we know that physical interactions by themselves can't produce new information. Even eminent scientists have agreed that the genetic code is like a signal from extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, what about the structure of the cell? Scientists admit that the living cell is far more complex than the most complex machine that man has ever designed. But even the simplest machines don't appear by chance and physical interactions. They have to be manufactured. Since cells are more complex than the most complex machines, they obviously don't come together by chance and physical laws. To think that they do is to avoid the obvious. The odds against even one cell appearing by chance are at least 1 with 40,000 zeros to 1 against. This is not just improbable or very improbable, it's inconceivably improbable. It's far beyond the scope of any materialistic theory. Now for the big question that's always challenged materialists. Where does the great variety of living creatures come from? Even materialists admit that living creatures look as though they've been designed. For example, the very outspoken atheist Professor Richard Dawkins has written, "Biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose." Similarly, Nobel laureate Francis Crick, another vocal atheist, has written, "Biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved." Of course, even after pointing this out, materialists avoid the obvious conclusion that living creatures are not just physical systems. Inspired by Charles Darwin, they say that new species are produced by the process of evolution, in which one species changes into another continuously in the process of time. However, there are serious problems with this so-called theory of evolution. The first problem is that one species never changes into a new species. Species only vary to a slight extent about a mean. No amount of breeding or mutation has ever created a new species. Rather, all scientific research shows conclusively that species are stable and self-consistent entities that don't change. The fossil record also shows that species don't change. When fossils appear in the fossil record, they do so abruptly, without links to previous species. There's not a single example in the fossil record of one species changing into another species by gradual stages. Besides that, the fossil record clearly shows that many varieties of living creatures have remained unchanged in millions and even hundreds of millions of years. For example, spiders have remained unchanged for more than 35 million years, cockroaches for 50 million years, sequoia trees for 50 million years, ginkgo trees for 65 million years, the beautiful and mysterious nautilus for over 100 million years, crinoids and bivalve mollusks for over 200 million years. Evolutionists say that single-celled creatures evolved into many-celled creatures and then into worms, fishes, vertebrates, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, apes, and finally to human beings. However, evolutionists themselves admit that there's not one example of an intermediate form between any one major group and another. Then there's the question, how is evolution supposed to take place? Materialists believe that new species are produced through mutations, are changes in the genetic code contained in the nucleus of the cell. But there are problems here. Firstly, mutations don't accumulate to produce new species. They only produce varieties of the original species. Mutation has never produced a new species or a new biological feature. And secondly, all known mutations are harmful, or at best neutral. No known mutations would be useful to the individual in the wild state. So in short, the so-called theory of evolution is not actually a theory at all. A scientific theory is a reasonable explanation of known facts. The so-called theory of evolution is an unreasonable and irrational cover-up of known facts. It avoids known facts, it ignores them, and it denies them. So it has nothing to do with science. On the one hand, even material scientists admit that living beings appear to be products of design. And on the other hand, there's no scientific reason to doubt this. So it's most reasonable to accept the obvious fact that the bodies of living creatures must have some cause other than the physical laws. To deny this is unreasonable.